web application development, and it's week 4, part 3 of our video series. This time we're talking about basic read operations with Mongoose. Knowledge requirements have increased. Last video we talked about how to install Mongoose npm module, how to move app.js or manifest into the config folder which we created, and how to configure db.js with a URI that points to the MongoDB database in the local computer. On top of that, a couple things we know how to do now. We know how to use the module pattern in Node.js files. We demonstrated that with db.js, a little bit of that, and how to attach an npm package using require syntax. We kind of went through that last video with the Mongoose, connecting Mongoose with the require. So what's in this demo? We're going to connect to a Mongoose database with Mongoose again, Mongo database. We're going to create a books schema. So we don't necessarily need a structure for a NoSQL database, but it always helps to have a structure that's the same. We want to read in data from a data store. We're going to create a book list root and a specialized template to read in all the books into a table. And at the end of the video, you should have an understanding of how to create a model and more understanding of the whole MVC design pattern. Again, this might be a slightly longer video than the ones that you've seen so far. Let's get to it. Again, we still have our Mongo database server running, as well as a little CLI that we can use to check to see what our collection looks like directly. All right, so far we have this interesting structure. It's very, very basic, and I think it served us pretty well. But I think at this point we need to expand this and add something new. What we're going to be adding is a models folder. Okay, so a models folder. So we have views, and this is the next part of our MVC framework. We're going to add a new folder, and let's make sure it goes in the right place. So here, and we're going to call this models. So in our models framework, or in our models folder, we want to add in a new schema, a new model called the book model. So book.js. So book model, the way you would read this is, it's a book model, or a book class, if you will. When we start off, when we make a model, we're going to say let Mongoose, we need to access Mongoose. We want to connect to Mongoose. So we have access to the Mongoose classes. We need to do that. And then what we want is we want to create a model class. Okay, that's what we want to do. And the way that we create a model class is we have to say let the books model, let books model equal to a mongoose dot schema. Okay, so schema is almost like a structure. We're going to open it up with curly braces. It's going to take an object. We can always make the object separate, or we can do it inline like this. Okay. We're also going to tell, after we create the object, we haven't done it yet, but after we create the object, we also want to point to which collection. This is kind of a configuration piece. I'm going to say the collection we're going to connect to when we're ready to go is going to be the books collection. And to know how this works, if we go back to our command prompt, we can see that we were always doing things with books. So if I go up here to our command prompt, we can say db.books.find.pretty, which is what's happening here. So books is the collection. That's the table, if you will, in the database. All right, so that's the table. And in here, we want to start talking about our properties. So the first thing is, let's match the properties with what we have. So we know we have an ID, but we can't set up an ID. It's automatic for us. Name, author, published, and description, and price is what we need. So name is the property, followed by the type, string, right? Followed by author, also a string, followed by published, in this case, also a string. We can change that later to make it a date. For now, it's just a string. A description, which is also a string. And then followed up by price, which is a number. Okay, that is our books model class, if you will, or our books class. Everything we make when we use a books model, we use this, okay? Because these properties are part of our books class. Think about this as a struct or a structure in some ways. And that's what a model is. A model is just a class. Now we need to export the model so we can use it. We're going to say module.exports, remember just like we did last time, equals to mongoose, and this is new, mongoose.model. So we're going to create a model. We're going to call this model, right, something to do with our database, and in this case our model is going to be the book model. Book, okay? And it's going to be, we're going to use the book model for this, books model. By the way, if I don't like books model, and I think maybe that's a bad name for a model, I can change that. I can say book model, right? So let's rename. We can always do a rename symbol and do that now, book model. So the book model is this, each book, that's why it's instead of books, it's book, right? Books is the collection, right? And we're going to use the book model to make a new book. Once we've done this, the model class itself defines the model, and when we do a module exports, we're going to return a whole model, not just the class. So it converts it. It doesn't make it a simple class. It has a lot more power than just a class. It can do other things. All the commands that we've seen so far in MongoDB, like for example, insert and find and remove and all those kind of commands, we're going to get through the book model. That's how we're going to do it. So that's our first step. Our first step is making a book model, and we're going to do that in the models folder. All right, so far so good. Just checking the time. The next part. So once we've got our models folder and we have our book model, what we want to do is start defining a new route. All right, so let's start thinking about the route, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So I want to go and I want to be able to see a book list, right? And the book list is when I type in the URL book-list, I want to be able to go and view all the books inside of the database. So before we make our view, we're going to make our route. So in here, we're going to make a new file called book.js. So it's the book route. Okay. At the top, we're going to say let express. We're going to make it, it's routing. So we're going to use express to do any kind of routing. On the back end, we're going to say require express. And then we're going to say our router is we're going to use the express object and the router class. Okay, so router is going to contain it's a router object now we have access to. Similar to what you've seen before. We also need a couple more things. We need Mongoose because we need to use those Mongoose commands. We're going to require Mongoose. And we're also going to need to connect to a schema, right? So connect to our book model, right? So we're going to say book, and I'm keeping that as almost like a class, right? Is equal to require, and again, let's think about this for a second. We're inside routes. We got to go up one, and then into models and into book. So up one, into models, and then down into book. And we don't have to put book.js like we said before. So that gives us our connection. If I hover over book now, you can see that we have data in there, right? And it's more than just the properties. It's a lot of other stuff. Remember, it's a Mongoose model, which gives us the ability for us to connect to the Mongo database. So lots and lots of stuff. This is packed full of information. Next, let's create our route. So we need a get route for the book list page. And this is our basic read operation. That's what we need. So we're going to set this up now. And we're going to use router.get. That's a get kind of operation. We're going to say we're going to look at the main top level root. So it's not slash as in like, this is almost like a subsection of anything to do with book list. So if I want a book list add, if I want to do a book list edit, if I want a book list delete, it's almost like I'm creating a bunch of sub pages by doing this. Okay, so the first one is the main page. We're going to say request, response, and next, next operation. What we want to do, and we're embedding our controller in here. We're going to remove that later on in another video. So what we want to do here is, just want to make sure I've got everything correct. We need a comma. How about that would be good. So when we get a request, we want to respond with something. So we're going to do a contact.find or a book.find. Okay, so say, hey, book model, I want to find, just like we did find pretty, we're going to find, and just in case we have an error, we're going to return a book list. Okay, so that's what we're going to call it, a book list. We can make this anything we want. I'm making these turns up as I go. And so in other words, like the identifiers are not that important. Okay, so we want to find a book list. So we're using the find command, just like we would on the CLI. And if we have an error, then we want to return back a console.error, which is going to generate an error on the server side. Okay. However, if we don't have an error, let's say we are good, right? So we have no error, else. If we don't have an error, then what I want to do for now is let's do a console.log, and I want to kind of print out the book list. Okay, that's what I want to do. Let's uncheck that for now, because we really don't have a place to go, right? We don't have a a template for this. We haven't set that up. So right now we're going to do this. It's going to stop. It's going to fail. Our website's not going to work when we go to book list. But at least we'll be able to see it on the console, which is what I want to do. I want to see that we can read. Okay. And for now, that's it. Right. So we're not going to do much else right at this point. This is enough. Okay. So now that we've done this, that's our route. The next step is connecting our route to our app.js. So we're going to go into our config, our app.js, and just like we've done in the past, you can see that we have some routes. We have our routes, our index router, our users router. We need now a book router. So books router, that's going to equal to require./router or routes/book. Okay, so that's going to basically connect our book routes to our books router object, right? That's what it does. We've never used it though so far. So now further down, that's the one part. The next part when we use our routes is down here, app use. So first we define them up here, like a connection to them. This is our file that tells us where the routes are. And down here, we actually use them. So we say, okay, app.use. And this is where we say /, what is it going to be called? I want to call it the top level book list. And we're going to use our books router. Maybe if we can do it properly. How about that? And we're going to use our books router. Okay, and if we did everything, and if everything went well, then we would be okay. But something did not go well. And why? Because we're missing this save. So that's what crashed us so far. We can also, sometimes we get a weird crash like this, and we want to kind of go through and see what our problems are. Sometimes it's because we haven't saved properly. Sometimes we have to regenerate our connection, right, as an example. Or we restart, that's what that does. And so here it says that in our router index.js, we throw this error, right, because we got a get type function. It says because router.use requires a middleware function but got an object instead. That's what we're basically saying. Okay. So we got to check to see where we went wrong. Let's take a, oh yes, I remember what it is now. Because one thing we're missing when we did our routes is the bottom part. So here's our book routes, but we never really did anything here. We have to do a module exports. That's what we're missing. So module.exports, right? And that's equal to our router. So that's interesting the way that works, right? Because, and you can see now that we're fixed. The reason why that is we build up our configuration for the router itself. That's why it's called a router. We build all the routes together, and then we export everything, all the properties of every route into one single package, right? And that tells app.js where to look. Wonderful. So this is good. Now we can actually test it now that we've got this live. Let's go back up to the browser. And when we go to the browser, let's go to our site and then put in our URL. So it's book-list. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to spin. But locally, we're going to see that we have our data. There's our data. It came right from our Mongo database. Now we have to take this data and we have to put it inside of a table somehow. And for that, we need a view. We need some place to put this data or to show it somehow. So one is we've read it, but we have no place to put it. We can't display it in any way right now because we don't have a template for this. Our views are very simple, right? So we have to think of a way of displaying this data. That's the next part. So let's create this. So we know, right now I'm just going to put it in views, okay? So I'm going to make a new file. We can reorganize this later on. But I'm going to make a new file called book.js. And book.js is going to have a couple things that we've seen before. So we're going to use an include where we're going to go to partials and we're going to look at the, and it shouldn't be .js, be EJS, and I'll change that in a second. Our header is what I want to do, header .ejs. Okay, and let's just change the, save this, and we'll also rejig this by renaming. So we'll say book.ejs. There we go, so that's not an error anymore. So our partials header.ejs is the first thing. We also want to include our partial footer. In fact, without spending a lot of time, let's just copy all of this. And let's just put, place it inside of our book, okay, class. So we have our main nav, our bottom nav, our footer. All these are good. This part has got a thing. This is the thing that's got to change. And what we're going to start with is a container. Instead of using a jumbotron, we're not going to do this. We're going to actually display our book with a. Let's just turn this into HTML for a second. So here's HTML. And I want to start thinking about a table. So I want to say a div with a class of row, okay? And inside that div with a class of row, we want to have a div with a class of, I want to do a column medium offset 3, and this is part of the Bootstrap framework. So column, dash medium dash offset 3, and then followed by a column dash medium dash 6. So that's kind of like how many columns I want. I want to have 3 columns on the left just as a push. I want to push my stuff over. And then inside that, I want to have an h1 tag where I want to do my work. I want to put the title in there. So percent equals to title. I want to still pass in the title. Okay, so that's where the title is going to be. Book list. All right, is what it's going to be, right? I want a break, a line break, followed by a table, okay, with a class of table, table dash bordered, I think, table dash striped, table dash hover. So it's just a style that I'm using from Bootstrap, not to worry, okay? And inside the table, we're going to have a header row. and our header row is going to be our first row. So that's going to be our table header. And our table header is going to have, I'm going to do that, a table header with a class of text center. I want to center everything. And the first thing will be the name of the book, right? So name, right? And let's just copy paste this a bunch of times. So we're just creating our structure for our table here, right? So name, we're going to have author, right? What else? We're going to probably have a, the published year, as well as we're going to have, I'm not sure that we want the description here. We don't need the description, but we'll just put the price. I think that's good enough. The description is something we can have in if we're editing something. I think this is just a list of books. We don't need the entire description in here if we don't want, but I guess we can put it in. It's just going to make it so it's a lot longer. So I think these are all the columns that we need. Let's see what it looks like in our code. So name, author, published, description, and then followed by price. Right? So those are all the different things. We're not going to show the ID. We don't care about the ID. The ID is something that needs to be, we're going to see later on. Now we need a repeatable section. So this is kind of like a repeatable template row. That's what this is. I'm just using comments here to show you what this is. And now this is where we can use EJS. So we'll say %, and then we'll use a for loop. For let count equals to 0, where count is less than, and we're going to pass in the book list, right, dot length. There is no book list yet. We're going to make one. Count plus plus. Okay, and we're going to open up a bracket here. We're not going to close it because remember how we do it. We use a %, our directive syntax for this. Okay, let's just close it off. What I like to do is usually do the ending for this right away. So I kind of do the ending. So this is our loop. And anything between these brackets is what we're going to be doing. Okay. Now what we need is basic HTML. So we need a table row, right, as an example. And inside the table row, we're going to have a bunch of columns. So TD with a class of text center, right? And what we're going to have for the first one is we're going to inject. We're going to say, let's inject our book list, right, count, and then dot name. So this is just how we normally would see it in code, right? And that's where it's going to go. So our book list count name is going to be there. We can just repeat this over and over again and just change this property to whatever it's going to be. We have 5 properties. We're going to use 5 things. So name, author, published, description. It's going to be pretty long. We may have to remove description, followed by price. Okay, so those are the way it's going to be, and that pretty much does everything we need to do. Okay, because that is going to be our little table we're going to build. Okay, cool. Let's save this, and now when we go back to our book list, we should see everything in a better order than when we had it before. Let's go back and check it and see how it looks. So we're going to stop and go back and then go to book list. So book dash list. Still, we're missing one part. I forgot. So now that we've got this, we need the route to take us there. Yeah, so let's go back to routes. We are just in our book route. All we're doing right now is we're console logging it. That doesn't make any sense here, right here. I'm going to not console log anything anymore. And instead, I want to res render stuff. Just like we've done in the past. We're going to response render, right? And I'm just going to go and make sure that I've got this correct because I don't want to mess you guys up. So yeah, I was right. So we're going to do a response.render, and we're going to pass in the what we're looking at, what thing we're going to render. We're going to render in our views our book.ejs, right? And we're going to pass in a couple things, the title and the book list. So we're going to pass in the title, right, which is book list. And we're also going to pass in the book list itself, right? So we're going to say, so notice it says book right at the top. So book list, right? And we're going to pass in book list. Now, I've kind of made it kind of all caps. Some people don't like this. Maybe what we'll do just to make it so that it's different is we'll make this lowercase, book list, so you can see what that looks like. Book list is the object we're passing into book list, the property that we're going to pass into our pages. That's what we're doing here. Okay, so that's how it works. Res render. So book is the view, and this is the object we're pushing to the view. So let's save that. Let's go back to our page, and let's refresh, and let's see what happens. See why we got that error. Book list. So book-list. Okay, we got a bit of an error, but this is good. I like having errors because then we can figure out what the problem is. Okay, so book list. Oh yeah, look at that. That's spelled wrong. Book list count name. There is no book list and book list. That's the problem. I can see it right away. That's lucky. Sometimes it's hard to spot that stuff. But let's go back over into book.ejs. And so I put a capital I in here, which should be a lowercase I, which is just a typo. And we're just going to update this inside here, which is causing consternation. And refresh. Now we get a nice little book list. And you can see that we're getting all the information right out of the database. Notice that, like I said before, we have a bit of a scrolling issue because our thing is pretty long. Also, I probably want to make this longer than 6. I think this book list is a little bit short, in my opinion. So let's go back and change some of the way we did this. So column medium offset 3, pushed it 3 from the side. We want to give this something like, there's 12 columns in total. So far we've used 9. Let's add another a couple more. So we'll make 8 columns. And then we'll refresh. Right, you can see now that it's a little bit better, right? And that's pretty good, and it's responsive. So if we were going to take this down into a smaller area here, you can see that it will change a little bit for what we're doing. We can also add in additional styles, and I think I want to hit that at another video. But you can see it pretty good. We've kind of established some stuff in here. To show you this, how cool this is, let's add another book, and just to show you this. So far we've read from this, and if we add another book, so if I do db.books.insert, and again, remember we have to have a name, and let's add another book. So one of the books that I read when I was very young is Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was before they had a sequel series to Star Wars. There was Alan Dean Foster wrote a pretty good novel. So Splinter of the Mind's Eye, keeping with the whole science fiction kind of theme that we're using here. Our author is Alan Dean Foster. The year published, probably in the 1970s. I thought so, 1978. So this is, you got to remember that 1977, if you're interested in the Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie came out in 1978. A year afterwards, a book was made, kind of in the same genre, I guess, to capitalize on what was made. Our description of the book. It was an interesting book, though. Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, C-3PO, and all that kind of stuff, they're all part, and they want to find a Kyber crystal, or Kyber crystal. So that's it. That's this part. And we have some information about that, followed by the price, which is, let's suppose it's something a little bit better, a little bit rare, $29.95. Okay, so again, it's going to be closing off curly braces, closing off parentheses, and enter. And then we're good. Now, just like that, now that we've entered that, all I have to do is refresh, and we're going to have that piece of data at the bottom. That's how beautiful it is when you use something like this. So it's that simple, and that's why people love using MongoDB, because they can quickly add stuff without a lot of worry. Again, this table needs a little bit of work, which we're going to get to when we make things a lot nicer. But for now, we're doing pretty good. So recap what we did as we end this video, and it's a long one, I know that. So we did a couple things here. We started by creating a book model, and we talked about the book model by creating almost like a structure for the book, and we made it into a book schema. The schema itself not only holds the book model, the class, but also includes Mongoose data, the ability for us to use full CRUD, find, create, read, update, and delete, all that kind of stuff built in. So other methods are included. It almost bolsters or extends the book model class by adding additional additional methods here. That's what it does. That's the first thing. Then we made a route. Okay, we made a route and we tested it locally on the console just to see, can we read from the database into the console? Okay, that's the second thing we did. We then connected the route into our app.js, and we just used a couple things. One, this is the connection to the routes. These are all the different routes we've connected to. And then we created the top level URL for getting to the book list. So notice that here we have book-list, but in our route, right, we only have slash. That means if I want to add something else, if I want to add a new book, let's say I want to get the add or edit page, I would just do /add instead of /book-list/add. It's too long. And so what we've done is we've shortened it by putting the top level here, book list, right? So we're using the book list. So this is connecting how we connect the book list. And then, of course, we need something a container to show the books to us. So we created a new template. This is our new template that has a little table. This is different than the other template that we've used in the past, our index, because it doesn't just do one thing, it adds a list of books. In fact, if anything, this could be our products as opposed to our book list. Okay, so that's kind of what this is. All right, and that's it for today, or for this video. In the next video, we're going to hit full CRUD capability, and that's going to happen next week. Okay, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.